J's side, J being 4 here, wins. Now you swap player 4 and player 2. So you have on one side 1, 3, and 4, and on the other side you have 2 and 5. Does the outcome change? If the outcome changes, so that now player 4, who had been on the winning side, is on the losing side, and player 2, who had been on the losing side, is now on the winning side, then we wouldn't conclude anything about the relative power of 2 and 4. They switch side, the outcome changes. But if player 4 continues to win after the swap, after the switch in positions, then we'll say there's something about player 4 relative to player 2. It seems that no matter where you put player 4, given the positions of the other 3 players, 1, 3, and 5, no matter where you put player 4 in this configuration, player 4's side wins and player 2's side loses. And therefore, we'll say, in this situation, that player 4 is more powerful. In this situation, given the positions taken by the other 3 players. Okay. So our first result relies on a principle of ordinal meritocracy. There's a corresponding cardinal principle of meritocracy, first identified by Nitzan and Perouche in a paper in 1984. But this is only going to rely on ordinal. And what I mean by that is all we know is the ordinal ranking of competency in this case. It's pretty, if you're talking about baseball, yeah, we have cardinal measures of competency, batting average, slugging percentage, earned run average, whatever you want. It's a wash in cardinal statistics. But when you're talking about governing coalitions, we think that that's more precision than is actually possible, but ordinal competency measures might be available, so that I is more competent than J. So proposition 1 relies only on this local power relation that I just identified. That is, that I, say, is more, in this swap sense, I is more powerful than J given the positions of the n-2 other players. It doesn't require a global sense. Proposition 1, suppose there are at least the 3 players of the governing coalition facing common interest problem, 2 options. Players choose sincerely. This is something that we might want to talk about later. Players choose sincerely, that is, they simply support the alternative that they think is better. And of course, there's a whole literature pioneered by Austin Smith and Banks on strategic voting under common interest problems. I don't want to get into the choices about which kind of model to use here, but this is obviously something that we can pick up in discussion. Players vote sincerely. Errors are independent. If I didn't mention that in the beginning when I was talking about Condorcet's original theorem, I certainly should have, because it's the independence of errors that is driving the result that increasing group size increases group accuracy. And each player is more competent than a fair coin. P of I is greater than half and less than 1, so nobody's infallible. Okay. The decision process, as I've described, is representable by the set of minimum winning coalitions. If the leader is more powerful in any pairwise swap than some comrade J who's more competent than the leader, then the regime is suboptimal. And the basic idea is you're giving someone, this is what I mean by ordinal meritocracy, you're giving somebody more power who's less competent. So if you just rearrange the power structure of the regime so that you put J in the leader's position, if you made the coalitions in which J was the winning ones instead of the leader's coalition, the probability of producing the correct conclusion would go up. The corollary to this, you probably already anticipated, if the leader is more powerful than everyone else in the governing coalition, and that sort of what we mean by a leader. In the sense of definition 1, then the regime is optimal only if he is the maximally competent person in the group. Now, if we impose more structure on this, enough structure so that we can assign weighted votes, it's not as if they necessarily vote, but the set of minimum winning coalitions can be recovered by a set of weighted votes. So, for example, the leader has 3, it's as if the leader has 3 votes, everybody else has 1, and so on and so forth. Then we can say a good deal more. So suppose the assumptions of proposition 1 hold, and further, the set of minimum winning coalitions is recoverable by a weighted voting scheme. The leader's more powerful than anybody else, and all his comrades are equally powerful. So this is a simple institution with 2 levels of power. The leader's more powerful than everybody else, and all the other comrades are equally powerful. So for example, this would be consistent with the scheme where all the comrades have 1 vote and the leader has, for example, 3. In a 5-person coalition, that would mean that the leader plus 1 other person is a minimum winning coalition. If the leader needs 1 other person in order to win, so he's not a true dictator, so this defines a scale of how centralized the authoritarian regime is. It's not a true dictator. By himself, it'd be 3 votes to 4 votes, not winning. But with 1 other person, then it's 4 to 3, and the leader wins. If the leader's competence, 10 minutes, okay. If the leader's competence doesn't exceed that of the median, then the regime is over-centralized, going down the whole scale of decentralization. Reducing the leader's number of votes, as it were, makes the regime more reliable, increases the probability of the regime making the right decision. Notice we couldn't wind up with a conclusion like that with the first proposition, because the first proposition doesn't have a nice ordered power structure. So there was no scale that we could march down. In this case, with enough structure, there is a scale, and so consequently, we can make a statement that's of, I think, some use to people working on comparative politics or comparative political economy. Now note that proposition 2 states a sufficient condition for over-centralization, not a necessary one. So let's explore other conditions.